Y'all know what time it is. It's time to have a session with everybody's favorite therapist, Miss Michelle Renee Davis. Assalamu alaikum, sis. How you doing?
Walaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And alhamdulillah, I'm doing good. I cannot complain. It was a nice day today. It wasn't all cold or hot. It was just the nice jacket weather.
Okay. Turn it for me. All right. So with no janky weather. I don't know. It was pretty nice down here too, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But with nice weather, then we got to do something nice for them today. Then, so
Inshallah.
when we left off before, I think we was talking about emotional regulation, emotional deregulated,
Mm.
right? You gave some profound things about that, but I think we want to try to give them some more tools today on how to get emotionally intelligent and
Mhm.
emotionally regulated. How that sound with you?
Sounds like a plan to me because now that we have, you know, definitely exposed how people really don't have emotional intelligence like they think they do,
Okay.
you know? Now we need to figure out, well, how can I get it? How can I obtain it? What are the necessary steps that I need to do to get there? Which is very uncomfortable journey.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want better and healthier relationships, that's something that you're going to have to do.
Okay. Well, let's get this thing cracking. So, give me a couple of steps. First thing I need to do. What's first thing if I'm a person who's seeking to be emotionally regulated, knowing I have some impulse management issues and various other things, what would I first need to do to get started?
So the first thing you need to do is called acceptance. Um, a lot of people they want to glaze through their problem, which doesn't allow them to actually fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, you got to be accepting of. It's like going through the stages of grief,
Mm-hmm.
or is it five stages? Five stages.
So
Okay,
no, no, no. See, I ain't gonna let you get away with that, right? Because a lot of people don't recognize that there's actually 6 stages of grief.
so, but the first thing is you got to accept it. Like you have to accept that you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do that and do the necessary work of identifying all those places of where you need help, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to accept that you're not as emotionally intelligent as you thought you were. Always doing that introspection of where areas in life that you can work on to that impulse control or those feelings of sadness or anxiety or any of those things. Like first you have to accept that part that you need a you need to work on some things. It may not rise to the level of always needing professional help
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are in your journey,
Mm-hmm.
but just identifying that you do need to change some things about
Right.
yourself
Some guidance in some shape, form, or fashion.
somewhere. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first part that you have to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then next is picking out and starting to identify what those areas are, right?
Okay.
So they kind of go hand in hand, but sometimes you could accept things without really doing a good and thorough introspection of yourself and just do surface level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we feel safe at. We want to
At
do
the surface level.
that
Mm-hmm.
surface level stuff. And so we don't really want to dive into why we are getting angry or what's the core beliefs surrounding the kind of issues that we are having with other people, and then we choose to use that to demonize somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to look at that because we don't want to show that we are part of the problem
Mm-hmm.
and or we are actually starting to abuse ourselves.
Hmm. Okay. How do we get into the action of abuse, making sure we clear abusing yourself?
So like abusing yourself, what that would look like, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's just say like for example, I have a client who this is her first time in a polygynous situation. Now
Right.
she's not Muslim though, so obviously she don't have the knowledge and things that we have to be able to manage these situations.
Right.
And one of the things that she has always had issues with all her life, even before the polygyny, was anxiety, but then inflicting self-harm emotionally and verbally.
Okay.
So when things were happening in the marriage, that even though it was not right on his behalf, and what I mean by right, not right, I'm using that very loosely. I'm not talking about
Okay.
not right like in abuse, but
Right.
some things it's just it's not right, but it's things that you can work through. It's not
Right.
really, but she would internalize it and say mean things about herself regarding the situation. So now you turned it from um something happening to now you're starting to abuse yourself.
Hmm.
A dysregulation emotionally that you're having.
Hmm.
But what happens is you then still blame the other person for your negative feelings, even though you are the one that's abusing yourself.
Wow. Okay. And so, how often is something people do something along those lines? I'm not going to say exactly what she may have been doing, right?
Mhm.
How often do they turn in on themselves?
Um, in general, when if people have emotional regulation issues, usually they turn it inward or they turn it outward. That's usually the two ways of doing it. Which either way, it's still abusive, whether you're abusing another person and being dysregulated or abusing yourself and being dysregulated. It
Mm.
really just depends on your kind of upbringing of what was acceptable behavior and how we dealt with problems.
Okay.
Right. So
Okay.
if you had parents who, when they did something wrong, they blamed you, usually you start to internalize it.
Okay. And
It
you start using you just kind of fall in on the same category your captors or your abusers were doing.
mhm.
Mhm.
Or if you grow up in a home where your parents did something wrong, and then but they act like nothing happened, a
Mhm.
lot of times you usually will turn it outward.
Okay, and that's then just
Yeah.
functioning and taking it out on somebody else that's
Mhm,
outside of you or your inner circle or anything nature, or
mhm.
maybe even your inner circle.
Yeah,
Just
maybe you're
take,
in a circle. Mhm.
you're just taking it out on other people.
Yep. And you don't know how to take accountability for the part that you're playing in any kind of situation that's going on.
Hmm.
So,
So this acceptance is acceptance and taking accountability of where you are at this point.
mhm.
Okay.
So
Okay.
first you got to accept that you had some concerns, some issues, some problems that need to be worked out.
Hmm.
And two is identifying what those things are.
Okay.
Now, depending on how bad or good your situation is, rises the level of what you may need. Some people they just need some coaching, some guidance from family, friends, and then some people need therapeutic interventions depending
Right.
on how bad your situation is, where you're lashing out on people, you're yelling, you're screaming, or like the client that I have where it's inwardly just turning it, knives emotionally in on yourself,
Hmm.
which will raise to the therapeutic level of needed intervention to
Hmm.
be able to assist you with changing your thinking patterns.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So that's
Okay.
sort of step in order of steps that you would need to do, because if you never acknowledge anything, now granted, even though if you don't acknowledge it doesn't mean that you can't get help where they won't help you with that process.
Hmm.
However, the likelihood of you entering the gates of freedom is very unlikely if you don't accept that you have a problem to begin with.
Right. I mean, because there can be no moving forward if you don't have some acceptance or taking accountability for where you are, who you are, and what you got going on.
Mhm,
Right. And so, I mean, I can see why that is paramount to anything moving forward with what it is that you're suggesting and getting emotionally regulated.
mhm.
Okay. So after those three steps there, that third step, fourth, anything, what comes after that?
Now you got to be willing to change, right? So sometimes I've seen people do it where you would think that they are the accountability king and queen. You'd be like,
Mm,
they always take accountability for everything they do, but
mm,
they're not willing to change anything.
mm-hmm,
It's like that's a moot point to sit there and you do all this self-reflection about
mm-hmm,
everything that is you need to work on and then do nothing. And a lot of times people do nothing because of fear. Because on the other side of working on yourself and doing something different is the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I know what happens when I get angry and I cuss somebody out. They may leave me and they may abandon me,
Mm-hmm.
or they may talk about me, or I know what's on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what's on the other side that if I handle it correctly. Because if I handle it correctly and I don't have this self-fulfilling prophecy of what's going to happen on the other side, I don't know what's going to happen. Will they accept me? Will they treat me differently? Will, like, I don't know. So on the other side of freedom is unknown.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you talked about that, and the last time you was on about self-fulfilling prophecy and confirmation biases,
Hmm.
right? And so, if I'm not willing to do something about it, if I'm not willing to act, then because I've even in my practice, I've ran into many people who, yeah, man, I was wrong. I should have did. I shouldn't do this. I should do this. I got to do better and all that. And you hear all that, but then they still 4 weeks down, 6 weeks down, still doing the same thing.
Hmm. And granted, everything doesn't, change immediately. But
That's
I
correct.
tell people that um most people are not failures. You fail to plan. So
Right.
you say you'll want to change something, but you don't make and develop a plan on what that looked like concrete things, that steps that you can take to change that thing. Okay, I
Mm,
blow up when I get angry, I blow up. All right, so instead of blowing up, I'm like 5 minutes or an hour. Just
mhm,
just one liner. That's it. I'm gonna talk
mhm,
to the person that I normally blow up on, and I'm gonna say, "Hey, in the future, when I get really, really upset and I feel my temperature starting to rise, because I start to identify when I'm about to get angry, this is how I start to behave. My temperature rise, I get flustered, my hands start to shake, whatever it is for you that
mhm,
start to give you indicators that you are about to blow up.
mhm.
Instead, you do something different. Now, see, the problem is, and that's why I said people are not failures, people fail to plan. The likelihood of that happening in the moment is very slim to none. You got to practice the behavior that you want to do so in the time of needing it, you can use it.
Okay. So
So,
if I'm just trying to learn how to be a nice guy,
mhm,
right? 'Cause I was talking to wife today about that. And say, because she told me I was a nice guy. So
mhm,
I don't necessarily think I'm a nice guy, right? And so sometimes even for myself, feeling like imposter syndrome,
mhm,
with this nice guy thing, right? And so, but if I wanted to be a nice guy, then that means I have to start doing nice guy things,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Speaking, and smiling and all that other type of stuff here, right? Things that make you look like you're a nice guy, right? I would have to start doing those things in order to change and be willing to commit to that change of action
mhm.
in order to be something that I said I wanted to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is more simpler than the things that I'm saying. Um,
Oh, of
because
course.
within anger, right, it's so immediate sometimes
Okay.
that those things you have to practice even when you're not angry,
Okay.
right? So it may be like, so what I'll do is I'll tell people, like, let's say it's anger,
Hmm.
and I say, every time you're about to pray the five daily salats, I want you to remind yourself at that time that when I get angry, I'm going to do this, because
Okay.
that's going to remind your brain to do that.
Okay. You're attaching it to something at this
Yes.
point.
If you try to remember to do that at the time of anger, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take you so much longer to have that behavioral change,
Mm-hmm.
because you got to have yourself you have to be able to remind yourself when your frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that makes decision, when that goes offline, you can't think. So the likelihood of you implementing that new strategy is very slim to none. However, if you start to program your brain and rewire it before then, when it comes time to do it, your the wires in your brain is going to be like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to be attached to something, and they'll be able to, more likely to be able to implement it.
How
Where
long does a process like that take? You know, what you sitting? What's the general range between for somebody to get it?
for someone to get it, it depends on how consistent they are and if they believe that it's going to be, it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't believe it to be true, it will never happen.
Okay.
They could practice it all day. If they don't
Okay.
believe that they're going to be successful, it will never happen.
Okay.
Um, and if, and then like, I find too, some people in the therapeutic process, they want to change. However, um, they get so complacent with how things are that they don't practice the tools consistently like they supposed to be able to, for that to happen for them,
Mm-hmm.
until they realize like, I have to do something different for my life to change. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they think they had this magical thinking that life is just going to change because I'm in therapy, I'm getting tools, but I'm not using them, and it,
Using them, right, right. I show up, so I'm showing up, so something should be changing for me because I'm showing up.
yeah. And and I tell them, therapy in and of itself is not when we sit here and talk. We're just talking.
Uh-huh.
The real work comes when you're faced with that obstacle outside of this session. That's when the real work is happening. And I'm not going to be there. And so you have to do, because a lot of it is changing the way you think. See, a lot of people, they be wanting tools in a sense of, oh, I just want some tools to use. No, you literally have to change
Uh-huh.
the way you're thinking for it to last and stick. Because if you get too overwhelmed, those tools are going to fail you.
Uh-huh.
Like, like I'm gonna do deep breathe, because people like this deep breathing thing.
Right.
Yeah, you feel, and you might feel good afterwards, but eventually, if it's too overwhelming,
Uh-huh.
it's not gonna work.
How about even with grounding? You ain't grounded, getting grounded, because that's something that's kind of popular too.
Yeah, people, I don't like grounding. I personally don't like grounding.
Okay.
When I've done it, it doesn't. I don't like it the way it makes my body feel.
Okay.
Because it makes me too aware of how my body feels. Some
Okay.
people, it works for them, where it brings them down, it helps them refocus. And so I would not discourage from anybody saying to not try grounding. However, again, if you don't change the way you think about something, you're gonna forever be using grounding. Where hopefully, I remember was watching this video, just to give an example. The guy was like, um, they triggered me. I have this button and it says do not touch, and they touched it. What I want people to do is have this button where it's like trigger, 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 and they say, you know what, I no longer need it, and take it off the table for people to even be able to touch.
Mm.
What grounding does says, here's my trigger, I'm triggered, it's lighting up, it's flashing, and then it's like, let me help bring myself down, but the button still exists.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do is take that button off the table, that it no longer exists, that you are not going to trigger me. Because see, what people don't realize is there's a difference between being triggered and being disrespected. If you are being disrespected, that's not a trigger. You are being disrespected.
Okay.
It's normal for you to be upset and angry if someone is coming in calling you names that are derogatory. You should
Uh,
be upset. That's not a trigger. A trigger is something that's happening that is not necessarily abusive, but was a tie to something abusive, but it's no longer real anymore.
mm.
And remember when I used the example of like uh having an ex where my phone is always on silent.
Uh-huh.
But when they call, they like, I'm triggered because you didn't pick up the phone. That's not bad. That is a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I answer the phone and be like, what's up, blah, 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 you're not triggered. That's
Mm-hmm.
disrespect.
Uh-huh.
And people need to learn the difference between being triggered
Mm-hmm.
and it's really being disrespected or abused.
Or abused.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So a trigger is your responsibility to take care of.
Okay.
Being abused is still something that you should take care of in a sense of, is it time for me to leave or not?
Right. Yeah, you can kind of distance yourself from that situation. You have some agency in that situation there.
Yeah. So like obviously depending on what kind of abuse that you're experiencing, because some abuse is hard to get away from, especially if it's physical and it's violent and you're afraid for your life or the lives of your children. Or I don't know if anybody saw that movie Enough, where
Right.
her husband was a police officer, stalked her across states.
Right.
So it depends, but in general, depending on what it is, you have some agency to get away.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to deal with the problems that come along from being abused, which is triggers start to develop because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And those things got to be dealt with.
Hmm.
And realizing that some of the things you have to change the way you're thinking about what is happening, or realize that certain things is your responsibility to handle and deal with emotionally, is not your partner's issue
Mm-hmm.
to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like when it comes to like abandonment issues, right? Your husband or wife leave the house, you think they going to be gone forever.
Right. They're gonna be gone forever. Right. Because you have been that's something that you have to work through yourself. Right. That's a person at that point. Can we get back to saying that person then is really emotionally deregulated?
Mm-hmm. Now
Mm-hmm.
they can support you in that, where it's like, hey, like, let me just give you for a polygyny example because that's kind of easier.
Right.
Hey, in 2 days, Mugrib, I'm gonna be back. Okay,
Okay.
that's me supporting you, so it won't be just up in the air and it's inconsistent. And I'm over here one day, even though we're not supposed to do that anyway. But I'm over here one day, then next thing you know, I'm coming back 3 days later, or just all over the place, giving that person some consistency where it's like, honey,
Right. Are you letting them know you're definitely letting them know what the schedule is going to look like, so they know they can kind of hang their hat on,
mm-hmm,
and set their watch by you said I'm gonna be here at this time,
yeah,
I'll be back at this time, I'll be
yeah,
doing this, or you can call me at this time or whatever. Right. You set up some parameters for the person to know that they they have some security with you. But,
absolutely.
but just overall, them trying to manage themselves through
Mm,
you, that's not gonna happen.
that's not. And so then that's when people have to learn the difference between consistency and always.
Mm,
Right? Because as a human being, your husband can say all these things to you and he may be consistent with it, but it doesn't mean always. Because what if I got to do some overtime and I might not? You have to learn to manage that. And that's where the you works come in, where is you start to question your own thought patterns. And this is another way to be able to start changing thinking patterns, is questioning yourself in the way that you think, not demonizing the way you think, but questioning the way you think. See, this is what I'm talking about.
mm,
He ain't never here on time. Is it never? Or is it sometimes when he has to work a little bit of extra hours because he's an ER doctor,
mm,
right?
mm,
Versus you just always never should. No,
mm.
you have to start asking
Don't
yourself, don't it
right. Don't
can't
do
never happen.
right. Right.
Why me? Um, you so you start to have to question the way that you think. And one of the things that I feel sad for the generation and the generation underneath me is that we don't have any critical thinking skills.
Mm,
And that's part of changing the way you think, is to critically be able to think about what you're actually saying to yourself. Because sometimes we make up all kinds of crazy stories. I
mm.
think we talked about that the last time. Making up stories. We fill in the blank.
Right.
No, did that person say that? Did that really happen? That's what you think happened.
Mm,
What are some of the other possibilities that could have been going on?
right.
You can also just check in and ask them.
Exactly. And see, that's the point right there. It's like whatever happened to, hey, check it in, say, hey, look, what's up? How you doing? Just check it in, getting a check in. I'm letting you know what's happening with me, what's going on with you. Everything good, and there it is, right? Everybody checking, what time you think you'll be in tonight?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I'm working a little late, but I'm try to be in before X o'clock, That's that's adulting.
It's adulting. Like one time, me and this coworker, me and her had a lot of beef. At one
Uh,
point in time, this was some years ago. Me and her had a lot of beef. Now we work together, and it's funny that their relationship changed. But then we wound up going into another job, and we wound up working together. And so we said, "Listen, we're putting everything behind us." Said, "Okay, we're putting everything behind us." And I dreamt up in my mind that she wasn't communicating with me. It was a meeting. But what I did was I went to my supervisor and said, "Hey, I would like to have a meeting with such and such." So when she got to the meeting, I said, "Hey, I'm not saying that this is true. This is something that I believe and I feel to be true. And I wanted to ask you to confirm." I said, "Are you not communicating with me intentionally?" She said, "I thought I was communicating with you." I said, "Oh, then the conversation is over." So what I had to accept was she didn't know how to communicate with me in the way that I wanted her to.
mm-hmm.
She wasn't trying to intentionally sabotage anything. That was
Right.
that was that's her level of communication. So
Mm-hmm.
either A, I can accept that that's the way she communicates, or I can ask her if it's something that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
The keyword reasonable, not
Right.
hoops. What is reasonable for her to be able to communicate with me in a way that was effective for me? And I didn't think that that was the case because working in mental health and the community aspects is a lot. So I
Right.
felt like asking her to do more would have been a lot. So I
Mm-hmm.
just had to accept, like, no, this is the amount that she can do with the time that she had here.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on about our day.
Okay. I mean, that's adulting. How many of us really got? I guess how many of us been taught to do that? One, you know what I mean? And I got that's adulting. How many of us really got? I guess how many of us been taught to do that? One, you know what I mean? And I got that's part of why we're here right now is because this is how we're really getting caught up and not being able to converse with one another, let each other know, and saying therefore it's we holding everything seem like
Mhm,
and being hyper to hold close to your chest and then being hyper vigilant about everything.
mhm, yeah. And one of the things that Shadi had brought up that it like kind of blew my mind. I didn't even think about was is because at the core of a lot of people's issue is sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
When you sincerely want a relationship to work, you're going to do what's necessary to make sure that thing works.
Yeah.
Even if that means changing some things within yourself that's not
Right.
working for the relationship to work.
Right. I mean, everybody gonna strive for what they really want.
Mhm,
You know what I mean? At the end of the day, and so, and either you're gonna put forth the earnest effort and saying this is what you really love, or you gonna really put that effort in,
mhm,
right? Or you just gonna give lip service to the effort
mhm.
and not really doing it, but you talk a good game.
Yeah.
You
Because
know.
it's really hard to when I introspection is really, really difficult. Because again, what people do is when they do introspection, instead of just objectively looking at the parts of themselves that they need to work on and change, they start to
Mhm.
demonize themselves. See, I ain't that good of a person. Blah blah blah. You don't just looking at it to see where you can change is half the battle.
Right.
That's
Right.
the hardest part.
Right. Just getting in and having some acceptance that you got something going on that you really need to get fixed.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Or I guess that's not really a good word to use, fix, right? But that you want to kind of come to some resolution about,
Hmm.
right? And so having that acceptance and then the gumption to do something about it, the fortitude to do something about it, and it's small progressive steps, right? Just You ain't trying to take, I think maybe, well, I'm gonna ask you this question here because as I am now thinking, this comes to mind. Seemingly, we are very much into grandiose gestures.
Mhm.
It has to always be big.
Yes.
It has to be the biggest donation. It got to be the biggest wedding, or it
Mhm.
got to be the biggest ring, or it got to be whatever big, the biggest house,
Mhm.
whatever, right? We always into grandiose gestures, which then really says that we're never going to do it because we're waiting on the grand opportunity.
Mhm.
Is this part of the emotional deregulation?
Um, I think more so not necessarily the grand gestures. Honestly, I think it literally just be fear, false evidence appearing real.
Okay.
Um, because you'll hear people say things like, "Oh, nah, I ain't doing that because I ain't no sucker."
Mm-hmm.
You're like, that's not about being a sucker. It's really harming you. Because in general, when you change, it's for you. It's not for the other
Mm-hmm.
person. It helps with the other person, but it's really for you because
Right.
you're the one that's having all
This
the
is your benefit. This really is to your benefit.
for whether emotionally,
Mm,
physically, um, and emotionally, physically, and mentally. It's for
mm-hmm.
you. It's for
Mm,
you. Um, when you do those kinds of change, because the best thing about change that I tell people is like sometimes people come with a laundry list of things that they want to change. And I be like, no, just pick one. They be like, why? Because in general, when you start to change one thing, it starts to generalize to other areas of your life. So if you're like, listen, I want to create boundaries. Who? Everybody. Let's do one person.
mm-hmm.
Because in general, that one person and choose the hardest person. Because once it get easier, it just starts to go to everybody else. The next thing you know, you're going to work and they're like, "What?" Like, no, I put boundaries in place. I'm like, see? They're like, oh, yeah. It starts to, because it's just certain things that once you start working on one thing, it
Mm-hmm.
impacts a lot of other things. People think that when it's time for change, they think they have this whole laundry list that is really, really difficult. But usually, when you start to change one thing, it just have a domino effect on a lot of other areas of your life too, where you don't have to put as much effort that you think you would have to put in that you do
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to change, in any kind of capacity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. So one of the things that I think it was important that, when you and I had a conversation earlier is that, I know we talk about, I guess, the problem or the issue a lot, not saying you and I, but people in general,
Mhm,
but never give anyone any workable steps, right, to come
mhm,
out of that hole in which they are in,
mhm,
right? Which then only means that they're actually, they're moving and flailing their arms around, they digging, and only
mhm.
really they're really doing is digging a deeper hole,
Yeah. Mhm,
right? And so I thought it was important that coming on that we really share, you know, the 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 the, the steps, give the steps, some
mhm.
steps. And it's not to say that these are the all exhaustive steps,
Yes.
right? We can only do so much in the time span that we are in,
Mhm.
right? You know, you may need to contact the sister or contact me or contact whoever you feel comfortable with contacting to try to make this thing, I just say, a little bit more permanent,
Yes. Mhm.
or a lot more consistent.
And it's funny that you said that because how about I just had something else on the back of my screen and it said hypervigilance. And I was like, and when you said that, it just kind of coincided with what I just saw because
Mm-hmm.
also that's a part of, you know, emotional regulation and deregulation in a person, hypervigilance, like uh,
Mm-hmm.
flashbacks and things like that. Those are serious problems too, because again, something may remind you of something and you're lashing out at something that's not really happening at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, depending on if it's hypervigilance versus flashbacks. And so depending on what that is, Um, so I give you an example of what I'm talking about in this instance. One time, some years ago, I actually witnessed one of my clients. She accidentally set herself on fire.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so for weeks, it used to replay in my mind over and over and over again. It would start at the beginning when I first walked outside and seen her to the very end when we finally put her out and 911 arrived. Like it would just keep playing, keep playing. And one of the things that I've learned about that instance is that a lot of times why things like that last for a very long time is because your mind is trying to process it. But what people will try to do is interrupt it and think about something else. And in reality, you have to let it play out and let it play out so that your mind can integrate it and filter it out and really deal with it, which is what a therapist comes in there. And you
Right.
deal with it and you talk about it and you're like, this was a lot. And then eventually, now when I think about it, it doesn't have that visceral reaction that when it first happened to me. Like some people that lasts for years because
Yeah,
they
I'm gonna say that because that's seeming like that there's a person that really has gotten stuck in
Mhm,
that event, right? And translated that event to mean a multitude of things, right? And it could have been very traumatic, right?
mhm,
Um, you know, what is called, or even having some type of complex
mhm,
things going on, right? Where it's just stacked on top of each other. This
mhm.
trauma, then this trauma,
Yeah,
then this trauma on top of each other, right?
and then
And
they start to blend together. So now if somebody just lighting a cigarette, it's like it's like a lot, and that could have been my story if I didn't what I didn't do was I didn't interrupt my process. I just
mm,
let it happen as in when I thought about it, I just let it play through and did whatever it was that I needed to do, whether that was talk about it with whoever I was talk with, whether that was really contemplate on it and whatever, because that was a lot. And she eventually died from it, from the injuries.
mm-hmm,
Um, so you have to do what's necessary to deal with whatever it is that's going on with you.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it's not always acting like it never happened because acting like it never happened, all it does is, like you said, when other traumas happen, it just keeps stacking on top of each other.
mm-hmm,
And then it starts to associate itself with so many different things that then anything can become a trigger. You don't
mm-hmm.
even know why you're triggered anymore. You're just like, I'm just triggered. You
Yeah,
have
just anything, just walking around, just hot for
triggered.
them. You're right.
And
Just touch it. Ah, I'm
then you
touching.
have this low level of anger just above the surface, just waiting for anything to unleash on somebody.
Mm. We walk around like that pretty frequently, though.
Absolutely.
We walk around like that pretty frequently. Even
Search-
those who claim to have, religious guidance, we
mm,
walk around like that pretty frequently.
And we be searching for people to harm us or hurt us or think negative about us. Just searching.
Wow.
And real freedom comes in when you can meet someone and you have no um thoughts about who they are.
No thoughts about who they are?
Yeah, meaning like you'll have because you'll meet somebody and be like, I could tell she got an attitude.
Oh, okay.
Like,
You don't even
what,
know that person. How you gonna say she gonna you just
how did you
you
get
judging? How you gonna judge? You ain't even spoke to the person.
how did you come to that conclusion? What did
Right.
they do? I could just tell. You know how all my life people used to say that about me. They used to be like, I used to think you was me. I said, why? They said, because your face. My face what? I looked at you and then scrunched my face up. Like, what they be like, well, you really didn't smile. Cause I didn't have nothing to smile about at the time. That's why. Like it wasn't in regards to me looking at you and thinking anything. Like,
Right.
but, we come in and we have these expectations of people. And don't get me wrong, Sometimes it be on point, depending on if a person is not aware of who they are and what the vibes they're giving off. This is absolutely possible. I don't want to take that away from people. Like, that's not a real thing, that people don't show up into spaces where you can tell like they nasty. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that. But what I am saying is give people a chance for 5 seconds
Right.
to see if maybe that day they wasn't having a good day.
Right.
And that's why it may have seemed like that. Or
Mhm.
maybe they was nervous, so they was, or sometimes they a little bit more shy and reserved when they first meet people. Give people
Mhm.
an opportunity. But when they show you who they are, please believe them. Please believe them. Don't
Mm.
think you can change them, ladies. Men, don't think
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say, yeah, you got some brothers who think we can change the women around too now. It's just not the women.
I find men, well, this is my opinion, and you can
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I find that a lot of times when men meet women, a lot of times they be hoping that they don't change, especially if they find good ones. And then women, we always expect the men to change, and they be like,
Well,
"No."
if you find a good one, you ain't probably looking for them to do no changing. But some of them you see them, they got flaws, and you check out their flaws, and you see the flaws. You think, oh man, I don't think she knew it was me. She had to help out. I can help out. I can get beyond that point. Blah 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 blah. Right? And I mean, it's sometimes it's the Superman in them. You know what I mean? In
The
us.
codependent in them, the codependent in them.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And so you go to thinking that you got the information, and the love that you're gonna be given is gonna be so dynamic that she's just gonna fall over and just whatever. You know what I mean? You're just gonna tame her, you know.
Yeah, no, people gotta learn that relationships are about being interdependent and
Right,
not being codependent where it's lopsided.
right,
A person, like, granted, you're supposed to balance each other out, where one person may be dependent in this area, but they strong and independent in
right.
this area.
They might have some challenges in one area, but then they doing better other ones. Mm-hmm.
Y'all share. But I find that what you're talking about, being putting the cape on, being Superman, Superwoman, that's more of a codependent issue, which
Mm-hmm.
also too is a form of selfishness. People be thinking like, I'm always giving, I'm selfless. No, it's actually kind of selfish, because what you're hoping is to gain their love, their admiration, and that you finally like you're showing up for them like no one ever showed up for you, and you get to be this person
Mm-hmm.
that is harmful to you and them actually.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so, and you know what? I'm still tying that back into what we talked about earlier. That's still more emotional deregulation.
Yes, because you're trying to use someone else to regulate your feelings and emotions by, if
Mhm.
I do this, if I do that, if I they're recognizing me. That's not, no, no.
Hmm.
Who you are is dependent on who you decide to be every single day.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
tell you that all the time. Every day I wake up to be who I want to be. And if I fall a little bit short, the next day when I wake up, I try again.
Mhm. Well, I mean,
That's not dependent and contingent on what
on something, someone else, external me,
mm,
other than Allah,
yeah.
right? Other than God, right? Anything outside of that, I'm not really just giving myself over to it. And so therefore I can kind of, if I'm accepting of that, going back to what you said, if I'm accepting of that,
Mhm,
then I can start just taking more accountability for me.
yeah.
In that's not just being selfishness at that point.
I consider that self care, because the laws of Ajah says save yourself and then your family.
Mm-hmm.
If you all crazy and out your mind, who are you helping? Even clients that come in who are codependent, They'll come in and they be like, I just want to help people and blah 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 blah, and they will give me all of these reasons why they want to do this at the expense of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always ask them, I say, don't everyone deserve the best version of you? And they be hopping on it. They like, yes, of course. I said, how can they have the best version of you if you don't take care of yourself?
Whoo, man. Say that again for the people in the back. That's real. How can you be the best version for anybody if you're not the best version for yourself?
That's why in the airplane they say, put the mask on
That's
you.
all before you save anybody else. Put that mask on you, then put it on your own kid.
On
You
your
know what I mean? They say, your own kid. You can't even save your kid right
no.
because you don't want to put that mask on them first, and then get you and the kid in trouble.
So if I don't save myself first, like Allah told me, how can I save my family?
Mhm.
How can I do any of that?
Yeah, but I think a lot of times I think people lose the context of that. When we start talking about self care,
Mhm.
right? They think it got to be some, pampering type of
Yes.
right
Mm.
thing. It has to be something along those lines there, right? That then shows some type of extravaganza or so extravagant whatever,
Yeah,
right?
I gotta go get a massage or I gotta go. No, like, how about go to the doctors? You said you've been
Right.
having some chest pains. Like,
Right. You saying your elbow hurt a little bit. Why don't you go see if you got some arthritis or something sitting up in that or whatever,
yeah,
right? You ain't had a physical in a couple of years. You know what I mean? How about go do that?
because that's another thing too. And I'm glad that we're talking about this because going to the doctor and getting blood work, especially if you live in, first of all, as some people who are hijabis, right? We don't get as much sunlight as other people, so we don't get as much vitamin D. How can your brain work as efficiently as it can if it's not getting all the vitamins and nutrients that it needs to operate correctly?
Right.
First of all, our diet is horrible, like
Mm-hmm.
especially if you eat McDonald's and Wawa every day.
The Wawa. Mm-hmm.
The Wawas,
Yeah, the Wawa, man. I ain't tell you no lie, man. I ran into that place, man. That thing scared me, man. It's like the Wawa is like the quick trips down here, I think. I don't
Mhm.
know. Y'all get the
Yeah,
gas stations or something, you know what I mean? It's like on every corner. Like good gracious alive, man. Y'all love that Wawa up that way. But
yes.
anyway,
So, making sure you have enough vitamin D, iron, and all, like making sure that your blood work is good because that is partially probably contributing to a lot of other emotional deregulations that you didn't even realize. And so your body can't process the trauma efficiently and appropriately because it's not functioning properly for you to even
wow.
be able to work to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So those things gotta be addressed. Um, and some people's emotional dysregulation is a chemical imbalance. Some of you need medication. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Some
Uh-huh.
of you guys need medication to regulate your mood because you'll have hormonal imbalances. And see, and my issues with that is that people always say, I don't need no psych meds, blah, because they look at having psychiatric problem as a moral or personal deficiency.
Right.
But if you say you got high blood pressure, take this, people be like, oh, okay. Like I had a client where they said, "Oh, I don't take medication because I don't like the side effects." I said, oh, "Okay, I understand that." I was like, "So, what are you doing?" "Oh, I take I think she said Nyquil or Benadryl." I'm like, "You know that's medication, right?" "No, no, no, but it's not." I said, "Do you want to look up the side effects of those medications that you
Patience.
actually are taking?"
Exactly.
Oh, it's all those. I say yes. All medication, all pharmaceuticals have the potential to have side
Side
effects.
effects. Right.
And let's be honest, just like your pancreas and your heart and all those kind of things that you are willing to take medication, your brain is actually an organ just like all the rest of your body systems.
Right.
So if your organ aka your brain, is having some deficiencies, you might need to take medication. Granted, am I, on a street corners advocating for medications? No. But at the same time, depending on where you are in your journey and your process, you may need medication,
Right. Right.
depending on where you are.
Right.
Could you get off of it one day? Maybe. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's different. But however, if you're so depressed that you can't get out of bed, it doesn't matter how many teas or herbal concoctions, you got to actually get up to make them. If you
Hmm.
can't get up to make them, it may be easier to take one pill a day and
Right. Then
just
start your regiment with your teas and whatnot and see if you can kind of move it from there.
but you gotta do something quick, fast, and
Right.
right. And some of you gonna be on medication for the rest of your life, and that is okay too.
Hmm.
That is okay. It doesn't make you less than, because your mental health concerns or conditions or whatever is not your personality.
Right.
It's something you're struggling with.
Right.
Just like if you had other
Like
medical
if somebody was diabetic or high blood pressure or whatever, you got something that's an ailment, you
problems.
know. Yeah, for sure. Well, as always, because I ain't gonna burn you out because you got a whole year worth of coming back to see me. So
Mashallah,
so
inshallah.
inshallah, and I'm hoping that you continue to step up to the call, you know what I mean, and ask for your support in this. But we want to make sure that we continue to contact, everybody's favorite therapist. So how can they reach you?
So you can go to my website, which is wfmmh.com, and you can schedule appointments through the portal, or you can call 484-841-9595 to schedule an appointment. And I'm only licensed in Pennsylvania. So right now, those are my clientels that can utilize their insurance if you are located in Pennsylvania, meaning that at the time of the session, you are in Pennsylvania. You don't have to live here. So, like, if you decide you want to live in Jersey and you want to come to Philly to
To
have,
get some sessions, you can do it online, right?
you can do that. But you just
And
have
you
to, for insurance purposes, you have to physically be in Pennsylvania at the time of the appointment.
okay.
Where that may be, if you're doing virtual, I don't know. But if that's what you decide to do, that's what you can
That's
do.
what you decided to do.
Yeah.
Okay, got you, got you. Well, you just gave. I hope y'all peeped the game that she just gave y'all now. So, also you have a podcast that you're doing too, with a co-worker of yours or a cohort of yours.
Hmm.
But you give us to let everybody know how they can see
Yes.
your podcast.
So I am doing a podcast with my companion. Her name is Kendra. She's also a licensed therapist, and she is located in Jersey. I don't know her clinic's names off the top of her head, but if you go to her Facebook, you will be able to contact her through there to schedule appointments with her. And you can look at our podcast on Everyone's Favorite Therapist on YouTube, and you will be able to see our content together.
All right, all
A
right.
lot it's a lot of therapists out there that who are Muslim, because and even if for whatever reason, because again, I'm not for everyone. Like, I understand that, but I also know other Muslim therapists that I can also connect you guys with, who take clients. Some of them accept insurance, some of them don't. So there are other people that, even if it's not me that you're inquiring about, I have other Muslim therapists that I can connect you with to get you the help that you need. So please, if I know it, you're going to know it. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, even if it's not from for services from me. I'm okay with that too, because I want people to get help, even if it's not from me. So I
Yeah.
want it to be very clear.
Well, alhamdulillah, we appreciate you in that. And of course, everybody, y'all know how y'all can reach out to the Get Made podcast. We stream it every Monday on Hassan Clay's Facebook page
Mhm.
and on YouTube at the Get Made podcast. So please subscribe. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. Check us out. Also, um, we'll be in we'll be in Delaware too at the end of the year
Okay.
for the conference up there. So please check us out. I know Sister Sophia and there's a host of other of us will be there. So
Mhm.
definitely by all means check us out. And again, we're here to help you. You know, we're here to help you. And so, but we can only do it if you come up and let us know that you need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
So that thanks, sis. We're gonna see you in a few more weeks.
Yeah.
Inshallah. And
So
may Allah continue to bless
so let's
you. I
just
mean,
people can know like one the steps because this is gonna be the most important. So we're just gonna put it all together for people.
okay, put it
Like,
together for me.
so one acceptance. You got to do have
Accept it. Uh-huh.
some introspecting and identify where it is that you need the help for. You need to find someone that can assist you in that help, whether that is a mentor, whether that is a therapist, whether that is whatever it is that you may think that you need. That is also questioning yourself, not in a derogatory way, but just using critical thinking skills to say, is this what's really happening? I know I feel this way, but is it really true? Could it be other reasons why? You just use your critical thinking skills so that you can change the way that you think. People are not a failure. People fail to plan. So if you have something that you want to change that may not come as often around that you need to change, that's when you start setting an alarm and associate those things with certain things so that you can work on them even if they're not present in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, anger again. Anger doesn't happen all the time. However, you might need to be able to practice the skills that you're going to utilize so you can combat the anger in the future.
Inshallah.
Inshallah ta'ala. And also going to the Quran and the Sunnah of how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam have dealt with things in regards to anger, where if you don't have nothing nice today, you can just be quiet. You don't have to always say anything. Also considering the use of medication in your journey and your process. I'm not saying that it's going to work for everybody. I'm not going to say that you're going to need it long term or if you need it for short term, but figure something out that's going
Mm-hmm.
to help you and to assist you. And please make sure you get some blood work done because you might even have a deficiency, which make change even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Get your blood work,
Exactly.
make sure that that's you're in a good zone to be able to work on the issues or problems that you have.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And I thank you again for giving us that recap. I really do appreciate that. And actually, I missed it myself because I wanted you to do it. Then I got off of it and I forgot about it. So thank you for stepping back in with that.
Yeah,
And so,
that's what the law helped remind me of.
I mean, alhamdulillah. So with that, we like to thank everybody for tuning in to another great episode of the Get Made podcast. And we're going to see you guys in a couple of weeks. And may Allah continue to bless us all. May guide us all. May make us all stronger in the faith. And may He continue to allow us to seek His face. I mean.
Ameen.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.